Hi and welcome everybody to the SUSE QE Tools workshop. This is the last session for 2025. And the topic for today to conclude is the uh, roadmap discussion for December. We did the last in October. That one I messed up the recording, and also the one in before we lost that. So I think it's a good opportunity to try again. I checked the recording quality. There shouldn't be any outages or broken sound in in my microphone recording this time. I checked 3 times. So for as the first step, what I would like to do with you is look into the tickets that we have resolved in the individual teams. Tools team is the tools group is split into 2 teams. So let's take a look into what QE Infra has done first over the period of the last 60 days. We have 87 tickets resolved, and I sorted now by priority from low to bottom, from low to top. So the immediate and urgent alert reaction comes last. Let's take a look. So we did multiple changes in the OSD deployment, which had been automatic for years, but we encountered some problem, which again can be related to repositories temporarily not being available or certain problems in the mirror infrastructure. So we applied more retrying there. Also, sometimes we had emails sent out when actually there were updated packages, but they were merely rebuilds and not really changes to OpenGA packages were done. That really happened because we focused much more on QEM bot and other related tooling. So for quite some weeks, we didn't have any relevant commits in the OpenGA repository. And only then we realized that we received multiple emails with no changelog in there. So thank you for Gaurav in particular to fix that so that we would not send out emails with an empty changelog. Then the UEFI images that are used for Cremo machine continue to pose some problems, related to secure boot and simulating some shim signatures or something like that before releasing a product are problematic, and it's hard to provide a consistent infrastructure there from official packages when sometimes there are only non-official packages. Then one interesting idea which we brought in from the OpenSUSE conference is when there were talks about salt improvements or additions, what one could do to properly monitor an infrastructure. So what we did is we tried to identify ideas which we could apply in our infrastructure to improve. Then let's see what else might be interesting. Yeah, reliable PowerPC testing setup. So we have IBM Power machines of various generations in our infrastructure, and we have more recent architectures like Power 10 machines, which are now used in production, dedicated for the role with KVM-based virtualized tests on dedicated LPAs. But on the other hand, we also still need to maintain older machines, like based on Power 8, also to support testing on older versions of products for maintenance update verification. And there we tried to bring machines up to date with a more recent kernel. In some cases that worked, in some cases that brought in more instabilities. And similar as we had some years ago for AH64, we basically just have to accept the fact that sometimes those machines will simply crash or be unavailable, and we have a better and improved and extended automated recovery there, so that if we can't reach a machine, we try in multiple levels mitigations and then trigger a reboot of the machine if it's reachable. If it's not reachable, then forcefully reboot over IPMI. Even if that fails, then try a power reset over the PDU to bring back machines. I haven't heard about those machines for some weeks, so either that automatic recovery still works as accepted, or it could also be that all machines just happen to stay stable, which I find less likely, but is also a possibility. What else? Better O3 monitoring. So we improved and extended monitoring for OpenK OpenSUSE org. Grafana is used there for weeks, basically just to gather statistics about how many OpenK jobs are executed, if there are any stuck in a scheduled state or something. The more low-level infrastructure monitoring is done with other tools and multiple of them. And we now manage to provide a proper monitoring route on O3 directly, which we can access with less hoops, like no extra SSH port forwarding required or something like that. Let's see. Then we come to more reactive work that you see here. So multiple problems which are, either machine specific or point to some interesting problem in how the infrastructure is managed. This one ticket comes to mind. The ticket I reported that originally sounds like when it says rendering SLS failed Ginger variable dict object has no attribute D152. It sounds a bit like probably some syntax error in our salt recipes, and I thought we would actually do something wrong there with salt, or salt itself might have a bug. As it turned out, we have a highly unexpected a race condition in how multiple network interfaces on our production OpenGA workers are requesting an address over DHCP. And as it turned out, in many cases, we had the persistent leases used, but we also had a secondary interface. And if that one gets the DHCP request responded by the DHCP server, depending on timing, then what you can see here, D152, this is actually a dynamic DHCP lease and didn't really affect operations. The OpenK workers were just, accepting the network traffic on either interface, and that worked. And they were still reachable on the FQDN from the static lease, but also the extra interface was there, and then Salt could find and try to match that one, which was posing problems. So we actually fixed that by temporarily disabling the secondary interface when we don't necessarily need it for redundancy, and then bring it back, or plan to bring it back with a proper bonding setup. In the Open QA project, we found, for example, that O3 itself would suffer from multiple HTTP 502 errors. So basically, and also this one here is related. So basically, the machine was overloaded. As it turned out, that is due to much more increased AI bot traffic. So what we implemented in there was mitigations to still allow human operators to access the web UI, but prevent AI crawling bot to overwhelm the interface by using something like misconfigured routes which are intended for human operators and not for any kind of automation tools. There is still various ways to get access to the system in, let's say, by proper means. For example, there's the API which is reachable, and also In particular for AI, there are MCP endpoints which can be used, but obviously one needs to authenticate against that endpoint. So we understand that this is not a use case which is preventing the AI traffic completely. Then on the side of maintenance related workflows, there were a lot of QMBot related tasks, which you can see here and here and here and here and here, and also many more in the SUSE QA block for internal ticket references. So we did improve, scale, and fix QMBot where necessary based on the experiences we had from implementing SLE 16 and GitHub support over the weeks in before, and with more and more maintenance updates for the recently released product SLE 16.0 being processed and in the queue, and also QE engineers scaling up their testing. There was the necessity to implement multiple means. Among them, for example, to obsolete older triggered builds within the same product combination. Let's say if there's one pull request related to one maintenance update, and then the content of the according repository linked to this pull request change, which can happen also in the course of some minutes, but more often after some days. Then this should actually this by now obsoletes older tests which are still in the schedule. However, if tests are actually executed, then this is also straining the infrastructure, because more tests means we also need to store more test results, and we need to handle those results by either doing a more deeper cleanup, being able to scale with actually looking up the results to identify which one can be cleaned up, revisiting the job groups which we have on the instance, and contacting the according test owners and job group owners on the instance OpenGA SUSE QE to find where maybe there's some misconfiguration or maybe a bit too storage periods which we cannot guarantee. And putting that in the context of one saga that is in the queue for being able to consistently archive SLE maintenance tests for at least 2 years, we need to find a good middle ground to fulfill the requirements of being able to sustain the testing while also keep an archive of those test results for sufficiently long. That's also why you can see tickets like request increase of database storage file system and request increase of OSD volume for archive and request increase of OSD volume for results. But we cannot solve everything just by increasing existing file systems, because there are certain limits, like 16 terabytes for one volume of file of the storage volumes passed to our virtual machine, and where we create file systems on top, and also how we can actually maintain this archive of tests. There was one work which we started, which is in particular for the archive. That means like the long-term storage of older test results, is that we changed a previous XFS-based file system to now a ButterFS file system with file system compression, which helped us to provide much more space and keep a much higher buffer for the future for the archive. And that actually brings us to new possibilities how to use the archive. So we will consider to actually store more on what was previously considered OpenGA results not archived, to also put them into that archive space to make use of that. It will be a little bit slower because of the compression, but in day-to-day operations, I don't think any operator will feel that because, most of the work still happens on the works of, let's say, the past 14 days. We also needed to do better asset tracking. This is linked to still ongoing migration work of machines of one SUSE data center to another one. And in the process, of course, we also, identified previously used hardware which is then unused, or new hardware which we need to set up as replacement for old machines. And either teams are doing that and we support them, or we as a team also need to do it ourselves. We managed to finish one saga in particular, which is the saga about reliable and resilient QA infrastructure management. And I would like to take a look into there. Sorry, I have that ticket prepared here. So that saga, which we worked on over the past years, consisted of 162 tickets. Among them, what I already mentioned, reliable PowerPC testing setup and the better asset tracking. It also included the handling of multiple incidents where OSD was having an outage or a bigger impact on unavailability. For example, we had one incident in June 2024, and we always try to gather some learnings from that and apply that, which can sometimes take a long time to properly apply the learning. So it's not just about the recovery after individual incidents, but really also about applying the learning for the long term. Similar for an incident which we had in 2025-04, so April this year, and we also applied some learning from there. What was also part of that saga is the improved tools team composition, which is visible in a better split among the individual teams, the QA dev and the QA infra team, so that we are ready to grow them as well as be able to provide sufficient focus for every member in the team, because in before, one of the pain points was that people really had a too broad spectrum of responsible tasks and areas which they needed to monitor. So we split that so that people can focus much more, and members of this team really like that so much that they hardly change between teams, even if that is a possibility and actually also encouraged. Then the upgrade all our infrastructure to OpenSUSE Leap 15.6. You might wonder about that one because this is like way overdue to finish all the migration to Leap 15.6. Well, the long tail were actually what I mentioned about here, Power 8 machines. So they were still running a very well, and some kind of inconsistent setup. They were mostly running Leap 15.6, but with package locks on an older kernel or also sometimes other dependent packages. So the goal here was really to streamline that. And well, there can always be exceptions, but then we need to have a good understanding why we need those exceptions and how do we track those in particular. And then what else? PowerPC testing capabilities in OpenSUSE.org. That one was finished after we could find one, I would say, still temporary setup for a PowerPC testing effort. There is Power 10 machine, which is not yet in the dedicated O3 testing setup. It is available for OPK OpenSUSE.org in operations. How it matters when you run tests on OpenK OpenSUSE.org, you won't feel the difference. But from a security point of view and maintainability point of view of the infrastructure, it's not perfect yet. Good. So after that, let's conclude the QA infra part. So I'll close this tab and we can look into what the QA dev team has achieved. And what we did there is Let's take a look here. Well, yeah, also that one, Lead 15.6, all also audience network dependency Lead 15.6, of course, that was started and the majority of that was done a very long time ago, but only sufficiently completed after we could also cover this PowerPC story. And the, yeah, some AI bot-related changes which I mentioned regarding O3 were done here. And one important feature which we recently implemented was throttling of tests based on parameters. We started with this story and what it does in particular, if there's any OpenGA job with a max job time specified, meaning that you need a different value than what is specified in default, and then the priority value for the OpenGA job, as long as it is scheduled, will be scaled. And that is done so that the jobs with a shorter runtime, which are, not needing this extension of max job time, can always be preferred so that we can work on getting the queue of scheduled jobs down a bit quicker. What will come next after that? So we basically chose that one first, not because it might be the most important, but because it would be most easy to implement. And after that, we are looking into other test parameters, which should also impact how heavy or how expensive a job is seen. One example being the number of CPUs, another example would be the fail ratio in the past, like how often does it fail? It could be that there's a rather heavy job in a development job group, which was maybe abandoned by the users a long time ago. We don't have any good way to identify those jobs to say they are actually abandoned and not important for the users, because that really depends on the user group of OpenGate test. But what we can do is, if they do have an important impact on the infrastructure, then we can prioritize jobs which have less of an impact, which I think, found is a good way to ensure fair use of a shared system. What else is there noteworthy? Handle HTML files securely. So OpenGA jobs can upload various assets, logs, and results. And they could also upload HTML files, which, depending on if there's any JavaScript or SVG code included, might also open a door for malicious use. And to prevent the effect of that, depending on configuration in OpenGA instance admins can decide how this can be handled. So what is possible there is, and this is also what we do on OpenGA OpenSUSE.org, is that we use a separate instance, which is then allowing to serve assets by type. Or the other possibility, and this is what I think we currently still use for OpenGA SUSE, is to not evaluate any code in those files, but just offer the files for download, and then it's left to the client, like the browser of the client, how they handle those files. Just very recently, this is something which I looked into, is that for very long years, we didn't have any problems anymore with typing issues, except sometimes on AH64, which kind of reoccurred after we replaced a low fixed number of worker instances on dedicated machines with a more dynamic control based on the system load. So we have a worker load limit, which is preventing that too many OpenGA jobs start, but still during execution there can be surges in the load, which then can cause individual QEMU-based OpenGA tests to be stalled. And if that happens after over the VNC console interface, the key down event was sent, but the key up event to release a key wasn't yet received in time. What you would see is a stuck key, like when it should type system, it would type system, and that was already mitigated since 2022 in X11 tests. That is completely prevented when using a serial terminal. But in VNC consoles, which are sometimes still or have to be used, when you have like, a true Linux raw TTY, then the issue there was still appearing. And that can be prevented by using a virtual keyboard, which is possible within OS Audienst test variable, plus disabling key repetition, which is offered by OS Audienst distribution function. And with that, the key repetition problems also in this limited case can be completely prevented. What else? So recently there was Hack Week. Oh yeah, we needed to extend and work on QMBot a lot, and that was mostly for supporting this new Git-based maintenance workflows. And for that, after multiple attempts to look into what is the best implementation approach, what is the best existing software that we should extend or rather write a new one, we decided that QMBot is the right choice. But for that, we also needed to bring QMBot up to a more modern state. And then also we decided that, well, the Python 3.6, which is still the default in older Leap 15.6, is not sufficient anymore. Leap 15.6 also offers more recent Python versions with Python 3.11, so we can bump our requirements there so that we actually use a more modern version. With that, this also enabled us to do much more code coverage and also have improved style checks. So we have really good test coverage and a really good setup there in QMBot, so that for the extensions which we needed to do and will continue to do, we have a much better development base and I think are more efficient in getting that done. That allows us to work on features like product increments and the automatic approval of that, and also to mention, so Mama asked a question about using UV. Yes, I think that is still part of one open pull request. Yes, so there's part 12. That one introduces UV. So I would appreciate if you can take a look there, and I appreciate your feedback on that pull request there. If you like the approach, if you think this is the good idea to do, because we now have the dependency so that we can do that. And I think that is also making our project cleaner and quicker and more fun to work with. Oh, what else? Product name collision on ambiguous repo name scripts. Yeah, so there is this OS Audienst repository which was called scripts. That one now redirects to OS Audienst scripts. So I renamed the repository, and we need to rename all the internal references and such. And by that, if you create a fork of that, then very likely you can just accept the name and use that as a fork. that was making a problem in particular with OBS build checks in pull requests, because that one was having problems if the fork is named differently than the original repository. So, any questions or any additions about missed tickets for what we have resolved in this time period? Then let's take a look into the top level view on what is planned next. So we have those three sagas. The higher important one is the support switch to Kitty for OpenSUSE SUSE-based products. For example, sorry about that, SLE 16 maintenance support. And that one is going along well. That one needed us to invest the effort in bringing QMBot up to speed. We have all important maintenance workflows implemented. The increment approval was working fine in the beginning, but now with more and more additions, in particular to the metadata repository, that showed that we need more support, for example, in how test coverage, which is architecture specific, can be handled, so that we don't always have tests for all flavors and all variants of the product for all architectures. So support for that is generally in, but it depends a bit on how the metadata is set up, and to be fully verified, we need to monitor the situation there and ensure that it really does work. Similar for SL Micro 6.2, if there are pull requests which are really only relevant for that product, then we also need to ensure that the according pull requests and requests are properly handled. If there is, for example, no relevant SLE 16 coverage, but only SL Micro 6.2 relevant one, if QMBot can also approve tests based on that. And going forward, we will need to do some more scaling in there to support the workload, to continue doing that. And after that, also add support, for example, for new products in development based on Kitty. That is the so-called product development staging workflows, which were previously done using an OBS integration of OpenK, now also should be adapted when the source of the packages are in Gitty. For the full traceability, paper trail, and test reproducibility of open QA tests, what we needed to do there is, as I said before, ramped up the testing for SLE 16 maintenance means many more tests, while on the other hand, we need to store more test results. And combining those two requirements can only be met when we combine multiple steps, increasing the available storage, making more efficient use of the existing storage, revisiting the configuration of all job groups. Are they proper? Do they really need to store results that long? More efficient handling of looking up test results so that OpenK can still work with a growing database as well as results archive. Identifying which other results we could archive more early so that we can move them to the different file system where we have more space available. And then offering better ways so that users can actually identify and find older tests from years ago, so that we can actually revisit those results if there would ever be any, let's say, for example, customer triggered incident where we would need to look up what did we actually test at this time, and was OpenK test coverage sufficient? Does it need to be extended, or was there any kind of maybe false positive or false negative that led to a wrong decision about release or not release of a certain maintenance update? And the third saga is about supporting the SUSE Prague office move. Well, that turned out to be just the SUSE Prague internal data center move from the office, while also ensuring business continuity, which means like tens of machines, if not more than 100. And for the various use cases, be it automated testing, be it manual testing, that one still continuous, but is admittedly the least effort of all those three. Now, what we have planned now in the upcoming weeks, let's also look into the backlogs of the separate teams. So the infrastructure backlog currently has in the queue upgrading the PostgreSQL database on OSD to current version, which is supported on Leap 16, so that we can, after that, do a migration of the operating system more easily from Leap 15.6 to 16. That database upgrade was already done, but that showed that actually the salt recipes on the older version have a problem to support the new version of Postgres properly there. We, as I mentioned, we enabled already file system compression, and we are now in the process of migrating the according test results here. Still moving that. We will have a virtual team meetup before the holidays still this year. I mentioned SL Micro 6.2 maintenance updates, so we want to have that verification that, so, you know, it looks like SL Micro 6.2 tests are triggered. It looks like they could be generally approvable, but there are some corner cases where we identified like architecture dependent test scope where we will still need to verify that with, for example, currently open product increments and see what's missing there. In progress is that we, well, yeah, you can see here that we have some beginner tasks here because we are in the good situation that we have some people that joined us recently for squad rotation. So that's why we need to identify some tasks which might not be that critical or that important, but they are good stepping stones so that people can get onboarding as part of teams. What will come after that is that yeah, we found one machine which is still relying on rec tables, which is nowadays replaced by Netbox. So updating the scripts to monitor the infrastructure, plan and coordinate and work with members from IT regarding the move of specific machines from Prague 1 to Prague 3 data center. Identify where we still have too many tests triggered in QMBot for SLE 16, where something could be cancelled, deleted, obsoleted. And after that, in new ink approve run. So this was one which was just found the past days that it looks like QMBot is sometimes saying like there's a failed job and you follow the job link. Actually, it's a past job. So that one looks weird. Any questions or additions about the infrastructure backlog? Then let's go to the dev team. So for the dev team, we have let's see, where do we start? Oh yeah, here. So we also have beginner tasks, for example, covering doing code coverage of OpenK. What's Audience already has a complete statement coverage. OpenK is nearly there with 99%. So there's like 200 lines of code that still don't have any coverage in the current tests. So that feels like it's a good beginner task to learn the domain, to get into the development processes, and after that work on other feature requests for OpenK. We have the similar task for QMBot, so we are also increasing the test coverage there. This task is assigned to me, but I will actually use that to split out individual tasks for team members so that they can help to work on individual modules which still need coverage. And after we improved QMBot and brought that to current Python coding style, which also helps to prevent some bugs, increase performance, as well as ease further feature development, we should also apply those improved Python style checks for other usual projects that we maintain. The SLE maintenance workflows are properly supported using QMBot. And for OpenSUSE Leap 16.0, which was released a little bit earlier and around the same time, right now a different tool is developed, or it was developed, which was also based on certain OpenSUSE specific implementations in before. And having this discrepancy between different toolings for SLE and OpenSUSE in the domain of the maintenance-specific workflow integrations already proved to be a problem. So this task here is about supporting the enablement for Leap 16.0. And after the supporting or next to the supporting will also come some work to do the actual implementation based on QMBot. So the idea is that we will actually use QMBot also for OpenSUSE tests and hence replace the special separate tooling by a combined approach so that in the future, if there would be any need for new features or improvements, we can actually benefit from the same source and don't need to do the same thing twice all the time. And in progress is some onboarding, that's fine. So what will come after that is, so I mentioned this OpenSUSE based QMBot implementation. Similar to that, there's also this task here about better use AMQP messages within QMBot, because right now QMBot is mostly really used in a continuous polling and repeated approach, parsing responses from APIs of QM Dashboard, Gitty, OBS, and OpenKA based on a polling base. And instead, one can use MQP messages to optimize that behavior. Next to that, there is the product development staging implementation, which then, of course, should also make use of the newly developed features and not, again, start from scratch so that we can actually ensure proper maintainable tools for the future. And now related to AI, there is this task here to make the MCP endpoint 103, which already exists, more generally accessible. So for example, right now, from the OpenKA OpenSUSE org webpage, you wouldn't immediately see that this is possible. And this should be more generally accessible so that people can actually discover that feature over the web UI. A link to that is also that I would be happy if we can actually list OpenKA as a Cloud connector using that MCP. So Cloud is one AI service and also using and providing a local tool with, I think it's called Cloud Desktop or something like that. And there's this catalog, and I think it should be rather easy to make OpenKA be listed there, and that could also, provide some positive marketing effect. And What else? Product environments using current live patches. Yep. Okay. Any questions from you guys about tasks which are planned there for the future? Thank you, Mama. Well, okay. So with that, thank you for walking over the achieve task and the backlog with me. I can let you know the next meeting that we plan to do is starting the new year on the 9th of January with a retrospective looking back over the year of 2025, what we have achieved there, what went well, what maybe didn't went well, and how what does that mean for the future. After that, in the meeting following up, I would like to use the opportunity to review the product vision together with you so that we can revisit if that description is still up to date, if it needs to be adapted, and if not, then basically just remind us. So I hope to see you there in the next year. And until then, thank you and goodbye.